So today was the last day of the show Surviving Death on Netflix, and keeping in mind that you don't have to have Netflix to, or you don't even have to have watched the series to get something out of this presentation today, because I describe what's happening and then I chime in and give my 2 cents worth so that you understand a little bit about what's going on. And the number 6, well, the 6th show was all about reincarnation, which is something that's my forte. That's my bag here. I've been teaching that class for probably a good 20 years or so. And reincarnation always goes with karma. You can't have one without the other, because we reincarnate for a purpose. And the purpose for reincarnating is our karma for that lifetime. And we choose what we most need to work on, whether it's patience or learning how to, I guess, master a skill. But most of the time, it's about an aspect of ourselves that we're trying to perfect. And I've got a few, let me tell you. And I'm sure most of you guys have run into it too, where, like, oh boy, why do I keep on running into the same scenario over and over and over, just in different ways? Well, you can betcha that the lesson behind that is one of your current lessons. Yeah. So I wanted to tell you a couple stories today regarding reincarnation that happened to me, to give you an idea as to what can and often does happen for many of us, and how you can investigate your own past lives. So earlier in the series, I had mentioned being a young 6-year-old outside of the front yard, and I was all by myself, and out of the blue, this great big gust of wind came, and it was almost like, oh my gosh. I really feel like that was the universe's way of telling me that we have more than one life to get everything right, or to do everything. And even at 6, I recall being so relieved, because there's no way we could get everything done that we need to have done in one lifetime. So yeah, so even at the age of 6, there was that aha moment, or that realization that we'll have more lives to perfect ourselves, to get everything done. And when I say get everything done, these are all, many lifetimes have many different lessons. And as we work on a lesson, and even maybe complete a karma in our lifetime, if we don't watch it, we can even create karma, which then would either work, we'd have to work on in this lifetime or in the next. So it's like a never-ending cycle here, pretty much. Now, back when I was in development classes, I had taken a reincarnation course, which I now teach, and in that course we had to do a past life / present / future life meditation. Part of the past life is the one that, or the part of it that I'm going to talk about today. So in this meditation, it was pretty wild. I could actually feel myself. I was sitting in a chair with my back against a chair, just like this. And I could almost feel myself being pulled back or sucked back against the chair, like by maybe centrifugal force or something like that. And the opening scene was me dressed in a long dress, kind of like a prairie type of dress. And I knew that I had 3 kids behind me. I never saw them in the meditation, but I knew that they were there. And we were walking on this wood-sledded sidewalk, so to speak. So in this meditation, of course, I was semi-cognizant of directing the meditation. So I walked in the mercantile. And as I walked into this mercantile, I picked up the Nebraska Gazette, which said 1869. Okay. And as I exited the store with this Nebraska Gazette, I knew that my husband John was at home plowing the fields, and I could actually get a mental picture of this man walking behind two great big draft horses. Now, his name was John Tucker, and all I knew was my name was Sally. I assumed Tucker as well. And that really was the end of the meditation. So this is how tells you how long ago it was. This was way back when the Ancestry.com was free. Do you remember back that far? Yes. When pretty much Gateway was the only computer that they had out. That was us. So I went on the Ancestry.com, and I spent probably a couple hours there, and I could find a John Tucker in Nebraska between 1850 and 1900. However, I couldn't find his wife until I started playing with the spelling of her name. All this time I was spelling her name S-A-L-L-Y. And as soon as I spelled it S-A-L-L-I-E, bingo, there it is. So John and Sally Tucker were in Nebraska between 1850 and 1900. However, I didn't get enough of the information, like I didn't pick up the 3 kids or anything like that. So isn't that interesting? Yeah. So that wasn't like in the show, this on the number 6 show, that was more like spontaneous recall or children recalling past lives, things like that. And of course this is different. However, I wanted to mention that to you guys because you might be able to find yourselves. You might be able to find yourselves. So give it a shot. Pretty interesting stuff. In the spiritual community, there's also the theory that we live multiple lives at one time. Therefore, some of the information that you may be receiving, you may think is a past life. However, it might be a simultaneous life, in that what you may be seeing or perceiving might seem like a deja vu. So one of the theories is, well, there's many theories about that in the spiritual community. One is tapping into an Akashic record of something that's about to happen or something that just did happen. Multiple lives, of course. So you're not quite certain what's happening there. But my guess, my educated guess, is tapping into the Akashic record unknowingly. All right? All right, so we have comments here. Do you think everybody reincarnates? Maria, yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. And I know that everybody does. The reason for incarnating in the first place is to become more, some people call it Christ-like, but I want to go a little bit further and say God-like. All right? So whether you accomplish everything or not, again, there's reincarnation, of course. Now, I want you to keep in mind also, please, that that's the reason why we were created by the source, God, whoever you call him, her, whatever. That's why we're created in the first place, is to become the best that we can be. So with that in mind, our job, really, and our ultimate desire our end point, and there's no rush, there's no timeline on this, so you can take forever, obviously, is to become Christ-like or improve on our spiritual, our soul self. And the only way to do that is to reincarnate. Now, again, we have a choice as to when we reincarnate. And what I see, and I'll go into this a little bit later, what I see from my years of experience and from talking to Spirit, usually the time span on reincarnation is 10 to 40 years. So it's all over the map, right? It's all over the map. All right. Is there an end? Jeannie asks. Yeah, I suppose there is. You can say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. Or because you've accomplished such a great feat, right? You're so developed that you don't need to come through anymore. Now, granted, if you've had a hellacious life, you may decide to wait 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. But more often than not, we do reincarnate. So that's the goal. That's the goal here. All right. So, and I'm not seeing any more than the 1, 2, 3, 4 again. So the comments, keep them coming, my lovelies. Anyways, so on to the show. We open up the show with Aubrey, which is the mother of Atlas, this little guy. And she recalled him having night terrors around the age of 1.5 years old. Now, keep in mind, a night terror, we don't know if it's a night terror, which science has said that there's really no rhyme or reason, and very often there's no recall of it. That's the thing. There's the difference. So my findings, however, was that, so was he the boy that had the airplane thing? I think he was. I think he was the boy. No, he was the one who was murdered. Traumatic events or highly charged emotional events could trigger that, especially in a child. It would, if you dreamt you were being murdered as an adult, wouldn't you kind of wake up and get freaked out? Of course you would. So as a child, and they can't put words into these things, so it would appear to be a night terror. Yeah, it would appear to be a night terror. Like I said, I can't say that that's exactly what it was, but that's what his mom called it. But being that, later on, when he was a little bit older, he recalled past life information where he was murdered. This little kid was murdered, and it was interesting because in the past life, and here we go, the kid who was murdered, his name was Jalen, and Atlas, the kid was murdered, his name was Jalen, he passed in 2005, and Atlas was born in 2014. So we're getting close to 10 years here, which is kind of normal. What I found interesting is that there was no familial tie that we know of, that wasn't mentioned. There wasn't a familial tie there, which I often see in reincarnation. All right, and then we go to Jim Tucker, who's been on the show before. He's the child psychologist at the University of Virginia. And he talks about, and the show showed him bringing in random photos from Atlas to choose from. Pictures of who he was in a past life, pictures who his mom was in a past life, pictures of a park that he had been to, right? So these were all random that he had to choose from. Well, this little Atlas got 5 out of 5. Isn't that interesting? What are the odds, right, to get 5 out of 5? Pretty slim to none, I suppose, to get them all right. Janelle mentions in the show they only seem to remember one past life instead of multiple lives. Is that common? I don't know if it's necessarily common or not, but it just seems to be like that's the one that they're focusing on. Now, I want you to keep in mind, because there was, in the case of, who was it? Ryan, the older kid. It seemed like there was a whole huge list of information, evidence that he provided the family, and they can only justify or validate some of it. Now, isn't it possible that they could be remembering multiple lives, and what isn't recognized might be something from a previous life or something that was unknown? Of course it's possible. Absolutely it's possible. Why don't we remember our past lives? Now, what's interesting is Connie, there's a gal named Connie in the group as well who mentions this type of thing. So I've heard it mentioned that we have to remember our lessons. If you saw this little 1-year-old kid talking like a Harvard scholar, you'd think, what the heck is going on here? So we have to remember, and some of us do, some of us are stronger in these things, just as if we all have specific gifts. And this is really no different. So someone who's adept at playing the piano will automatically pick it up better. Someone who's more adept at past lives will automatically, more readily, pick up past life information. So it's really how we're hardwired. I've written down often, but not always. As seen in this situation, we often reincarnate within the same family dynamic, which I mentioned. And I do have a picture to show you guys in just a minute. Then he also goes on to mention birthmarks, matching defects, or wounds from a past life. Now, what I find interesting, and my daughter's probably going to smack me, but she and both of my grandsons have the same birthmark in the same spot. Interesting. I don't know if it's just genetics or what. I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing. So it is what it is. Now, hold on here. There's something that I want to show you guys. So we talked about familial lines. What I have found, and they didn't really mention it in the show, but from what I have found, very often we are in familial lines. In other words, we might be a distant relative. My dad, who just passed last week, mind you, might come back as a third or fourth cousin or something like that. Okay? And this is the case why I'm bringing this up, because this is what I witnessed. And I want to share my screen with you guys. Oh, here, you know what? I think I will do it this way. I will post the pictures in the group on the page as a comment. Okay? There's 2 of them. It's not letting me post it as a comment. What the heck? I'll do it after the show runs out, if you will. So anyways, the story behind the pictures I was going to show you is my husband's uncle passed in World War II. And my husband's third cousin or something like that, spitting image. Spitting image. So there was 2 photos I was going to show you, and the age difference is probably about 15 years or so, because my uncle passed as 21, and the pictures I have, my husband's cousin's probably in his early 30s. So yeah, anyways, and unfortunately, I'm sorry I can't find a way to post them. Let me see if I can do this just a minute. I don't know if I can. Oh, yes I can. Hang on. Yes, I can. I figured it out. So I'm going to post 2 photos. Same guy. Let's see if I can get this going. If I knock myself out, and that's what I'm afraid of. There we go. I just posted it. Can you see those? There you go. Can you see those? So almost spitting image. right? Spitting image. Of course, he's got a little bit extra chin there on the one on the right, but you know, they're probably about 10, maybe 15 years apart. It was, for us, it really was uncanny. It really was uncanny. So what about birth defects? Yes, so there's a reason for birth defects. The biggest one that I have found is, and don't take this the wrong way if you have a child with a birth defect or something like that, but more often than not, what I have come to learn from the people who've passed who had a birth defect is they came through to teach the parents. Whether it's compassion, whether it's love, universal love, you know, accepting the unexplained, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. All right, then we move on to Antonia Mills, who is with the University of Northern British Columbia. And she talks about what we had mentioned earlier about the dreams of past lives. And her example was Alex Stoney, which she didn't really go into detail about it, only mentioning that many of the kids did that, and that's what they were finding in their studies. But she really didn't go into great detail there. So unfortunately, there wasn't a hell of a lot there to share on that one. All right, then we go to Jim Tucker, who has been on the show before. We go back to him, and he's the one who talks about Ryan Hammonds, who is the 15-year-old boy. And his case was, Jim opened his case in, well, a long time ago, when Ryan was still 5, and experiencing nightmares and things like that. And he talked about, in these memories, grieving, like it was almost like he grieved the past life. He was that into it. So as a child, he was very affected by this life. And Marty Martin happened to be his past life, and if you recall, if you saw the show, the child would get all excited when he would see the Hollywood sign and say, "That's my home." And then he started talking about interest in dancing and singing and being on stage. And then one time he actually saw himself, his past self, in a photograph. Look yourself up on the internet. You might be pleasantly surprised. Now, granted, if we're lucky enough, we might have a picture, hopefully. That would be ideal, wouldn't it? That would be so interesting. But if you could simply find the information, such as I did, woohoo! Get some evidence, like where does this information come from? So there has to be some kind of validation to it. So anyways, so at the age of 15, it's really rare that Ryan has messages or memories, which is very common. First of all, very often our parents will say, but Ryan was lucky, our parents will often say that, oh, just, you know, forget it, you know, ignore it, whatever. So the child goes on to live their lives. Now, we are taught as children to be analytical. Left brain is not where these memories will be stored, because this is the mind, not the brain. These are stored in the right brain. So very often, this is why even when there's a child who's a born medium, will forget what they've learned or what they learned in the past, even in this life in the past, because what they remembered maybe at 2, 3, 4, or what they saw at 2, 3, 4, 5 is kind of, I want to say, either their parents asked them to shut it down, or maybe it's educated out of them. Yeah. So we're taught to be left brain. We're taught to analyze everything and think about everything, figure it out. Yeah. Angela says she remembered feeling like her family wasn't her family. Yeah! Me too. I was the oddball. Oh my God, I was the oddball. Yep. So anyways, getting back to Ryan, when Ryan visits LA, and I found this really interesting. When Ryan visits LA, he says it reminds him of home. Have you guys ever felt like that? Yes, yes, yes. My husband and I, our first time driving down south from Michigan, we were in Kentucky, Tennessee, but more Kentucky. I knew I had been there before, and my husband did as well. It was just that sense of, it was just weird. Like, right? Like Twilight Zone, right? So, yeah, Maria says yes. Connie, her too, yeah. So, it's interesting how often that we might pick up that sense of familiarity. And keep in mind, it's not only places, it can be people, places, things, experiences. Oh, Janice too. All right, Ryan is quizzed by Marty's daughter. I don't know if Marty's daughter and Marty's niece are twits. There's a few of those in this series. So Ryan is quizzed by Marty's daughter, and he's already given them such a detailed list. Oh my gosh. There was pages and pages of this list. And she underlined everything that made sense, but there was still maybe 50%, I would say, just by seeing the pages that they showed online or on the show. I'm telling you what, even if it was only 25%, that's valid, verifiable information that this little kid wouldn't have the faintest idea. Jeannie says Chuck, her husband, was our tour guide in Italy. He had never been to Italy. He said he could remember what everything was. Now that's cool. That's very cool. I love that. Yes, they were rude, Tina. Yes, they were. So he goes on to answer additional questions, what he can. However, most of the questions that Marty's daughter and niece were asking him were goofy things, like things that they don't remember, like what's the Paris reference, or things like that. And questions like that, and we talked about this in one of the 2 mediumship episodes, where Marty's daughter was so disappointed that he couldn't answer these goofy questions when he'd already answered so much. And she seemed very upset or ticked off that he couldn't, like he wasn't a trained puppet. Yeah. However, the niece of Marty seemed to be a little bit more understanding about how all this works, so I thought that was good. He did mention, though, that his memories seem to come from a dreamlike state, which it appears he can't will into happening. So these are random recollections. But he said dreamlike state, which I found interesting. So could they have been dreams? Of course they could. Of course they could. However, it can also be that he's going into this receptive state, receptive as in communicating with spirits, or in a semi-meditative state, and the information can come in there. Right? It did kind of seem, at first, Tina, she says, like he was lying, right? Exactly. And you know what? I kind of wondered, because the first time I saw the episode, because I've watched it a couple times, first time I saw the episode, I felt like he was ticked off and he just wanted to get the hell out of there. So maybe they weren't airing some of their other negativity. Maybe we didn't see that aspect of it. But he seemed like sullen, irritated, angry, frustrated. And maybe it's with himself because he couldn't answer the questions and he would get frustrated. I could understand that. He was a kid, for God's sake. But so I understand his frustration in that, because we all want to do good. We want to do our best. We want to help other people. But I'm glad he kind of shut down. I'm glad he kind of shut down. Yeah. So again, yeah, kind of like what I mentioned in one of the mediumship episodes, like we're not a trained toy or trained poodle or whatever, right? We can't just pick things out of our hat and make them accurate. Then we move on to James, I'm going to massacre this one, James Leininger, whatever, who recalls the plane crash in the water. And he remembers those strong emotions of fear, desperation, knowing he's going to die. And these emotions come up. So anything that is charged or supercharged with emotion is going to be what comes forward. Again, this came through, it started to come through as nightmares as a child, which I loved because he then began showing very heightened knowledge of airplanes, the parts of airplanes, how they ran, all that kind of stuff. And it showed him as this little guy, maybe 5, maybe, in this airplane hangar, or it looked even maybe like an airplane museum, where he was talking about all the different pieces and parts of the different airplanes and what kind of airplane they were and what their purpose was. And so it was like this little mastermind, right? Love it. But again, something that would bring about a trauma, whether, and for him again it was dream, is going to help you to remember the past life. If it's traumatic, because if you look at it this way, you know, if we just saw, like maybe I dreamt of myself as an old lady, or dreamt of myself as a woman in the late 1800s, I think, boy, that was a screwy dream. But when and I probably would have forgotten it as I woke up, because the impact wasn't there. Does that mean that everybody who passed from a tragic accident is going to be bringing back past lives? No, absolutely not. And to be honest with you, the cause of death may be evident on the body. So you may wind up with a scar or a birthmark or something like that in the exact same place. All right, proof via internet regarding the Natoma ship. So when James was young, he provided names, and he even said James 3, which was weird. He kept on calling himself James 3. And he even, once his parents kind of got on board, told his parents that the ship, he flew off of a ship, and the ship's name was the Natoma. And I think I'm pronouncing that right, Natoma? Anyways. So Dad actually looked this up, and sure enough, there was a ship. There was only one ship that was sunk in that area in Japan. And again, proof via the internet. Love it. Love it. And then James also mentioned, let's go back to the James 3. So in the investigation, Dad found out that it was a James something. I don't know. Can't remember. But James the Second, or James Jr., as it were. So that would make the most recent, him, in this life, James 3. So that's pretty cool, because he would sign all his pictures James 3. He also was able to provide evidence on how to build napalm bombs. What 6-year-old or 5-year-old knows anything about that? Right? So it's just so cool how this all comes about. So there's many people who can do past life readings, which I'm one of them. And we go through as many past lives, but the one we try to focus on is the one that is most pertinent to this life. The one that's most, like, that has so many holdovers for this lifetime. And then there's also past life regression, which there's a gal in this group, her name is Jeanette Stahl, S-T-A-H-L, who is a hypnotherapist, and she does past life regressions. This was so significant to me because before I'd never had a past life regression done until Jeanette did mine. And to be honest with you, if you've never been through hypnotherapy or had a past life regression, I can remember myself laying on this sofa thinking, you know, if I really wanted to, I could get up. But I couldn't. So it was the weirdest thing. Anne says there was a book written on this child. There was. I didn't recall that that was mentioned. If you know the name of the book, Anne, could you type it in here? That would be great. So Lindsay Wolf says, can you reach a last life? Yeah, I suppose you could. She said her mom and grandma went to a psychic and they were told their uncle is an old soul and not his last life. So when spirit or a medium or whoever tells you that you're an old soul, it just simply means that you've lived life. He's ever done anything like foolish in his life or done something that he would desperately regret, he can complete that karma in the present lifetime, or he could be making more karma for himself. Now, I want you to keep in mind that we also, if we say we are all said and done, we're done reincarnating because we are all that in a bag of chips. However, we can choose to reincarnate to help someone else. To help someone else compare or complete a karmic lesson for them. But we also have to then be mindful that when we're helping someone else, we can make more karma for ourselves. The name of the book is Soul Survivor. Thank you, Anne. I appreciate that. I would like to read that. That would be very interesting. So thank you, everybody, for chiming in. I hope you enjoyed the Surviving Death series. I enjoyed watching it and learning from it and sharing my 2 cents with you guys. I really do. That's, the teacher in me is coming out. That's, I think, what I'm here for. I know that sounds kind of goofy, but it's to help other people realize their spiritual growth potential. And this is part of it. This is part of it. So the teacher in me comes out, and I'm so glad that you were able to share that with me. And all these shows will be on my YouTube channel. 1 through 5 already are. So if you missed one of these reviews, it's there on my YouTube channel. Just type in YouTube/Lisa Bousson. So they're all there, and I will have this episode probably by, I'm going to say next Monday. It's going to be delayed because of the funeral and everything. Also, a shameless plug, while I've got you here in handy, my 8-week mediumship intensive course is now on my website, and you can register for it. Now, keep in mind that it's not for someone who knows nothing about this. You have to know, for instance, like what chakras are and what auras are and things like that. You don't have to have first-hand knowledge of them, but you have to know what they are, because I'm not going to be going over that. This is not that class. This is more like for advanced beginner, not neophyte. So advanced beginner to advanced intermediate, let me put it that way. Because each person will be assessed by me, so even though I give you homework, you'll have individual homework to do, exercises, readings, things like that you'll need to do. But as I critique you, I'll base it off of where you are and what you need to learn. So each one of the students will have one-on-one time with me, quite a bit of it. So there's a lot going on there. So you can find that information and more on my website, which is lisabousson.com/classes, or go to mediumlisa.com and then go to the classes page. You can find all the information there. So my lovelies, I'm so grateful for you for watching, chiming in. I hope you enjoyed this series, and who knows, we might find something else to pick apart. Take care, my lovelies. You have a great week. God bless. Bye-bye.